This video is on how I do my V-neck Raglan baby sweater. I'm going to show the different tips and techniques that I do when I made this. What we're going to work off is little miniature pieces because it'll be quicker to show. When I make mine, I always do the back, the two sleeves, then the two fronts, and place them on a stitch holder. I like to use my Denise interchangeable needles because it gives you the pins and the different lengths of cables and needles. When you get ready to actually knit, you can slide the needle on. You can do your pickup stitches along the side, then you can knit off of the needle and then pick up the other stitches. So it's really a nice way to do it. And the needle can go on either end depending on what process you're on. So you can put it on here just as easy. So first we're going to start with how to do the arm decreases to get that interesting little ridge that I have here, which really sets it off nicely. First we'll start with our decreases. We'll decrease 4 on either side because it'll go a little quicker if we do that. I'm going to try to keep the video around the 20-minute mark. This is just a standard decrease where you knit 1, pass the first stitch over the second, knit another 1, pass the stitch over. There's our 4. I'm going to knit to the end. You cannot do the same type of a decrease on the left-hand side. So you always have to turn it over and do the other decrease on the purl side. I'm just about there. A couple more stitches. Okay, now when I go on the purl side, same thing, you would purl 2 stitches first. Now when it's time to slide the first one over the second one, this thread always gets in my way, so I like to slide it to the back just to keep it out of my way and give me a little bit of tension. Then I can take the first stitch and slide it over the second, bring my yarn back, purl the next stitch, put it in the back, slide the stitch over, bring the yarn forward, purl again, and you do it for the same amount of stitches. Then you purl to the end. Then we'll start with the actual decrease for the armholes. It's the same decrease for all the armholes, whether it's the back, the sleeves, or the front. You can do other types of decreases. It's entirely up to you. This is just the one I like because I like that decorative ridge that you see going up the side. So you start by knitting 1. Then you do an SSK, which is slip, slip, knit the 2 together. That is one of the ways you can do the left-leaning decrease. There's another way, which I also like. When I go back to the other side, I will show the other one that I like to do. Either one works fine. It's entirely up to you which you're comfortable with. When you get to the last 3 stitches, on the left side you knit 2 together, knit 1. That will give you the right-leaning decrease. Now we'll purl back. Each time you do this, you're going to decrease on the armhole 2 stitches. On the back, 2 stitches. But when you're working on the front, it may only be 1 stitch because you may only be decreasing on the armhole side. Now the other way that I like to do it, which works well, is you knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, pass slip stitch over. And that also gives you the left leaning decrease. And you knit to the last 3 stitches. This is always the same. Knit 2 together, knit 1, and you purl back again. And you just keep going in that process until you get the right amount of decreases. So as you see, you got this 1 extra row of stitches before you get the decreases, so you can actually sew in between those. That's what we're going to do next. We're going to pretend like this is a sleeve and this is my front. So these would be sewn lengthwise down the side this way. When you get to this part, you're going to turn it like this and they're going to connect together this way, which is a little different way of sewing it together. I'll show both methods. Now the first couple are kind of hard because you really don't have that ridge. As you can see right here, you don't have the ridge because of the bind-offs you have to do at the end. So you kind of have to do your best, kind of fudge them in. Being a small project, they come together really easily. I do every single horizontal bar because what you're picking up is a horizontal bar between the last stitch and your decrease stitch. You'll be able to see a little better now. See, there's the bar. When I make these, I pick up every single horizontal bar. I want to make sure that if I have 28 rows on the armhole, I have 28 rows, say, on the front. So if I do every single one of these, I should wind up even. Now I never pull it tight to start with. I like to leave it a little bit open so I can make sure I'm still following the same line of stitches. Then there's a little trick I do when I pull it, because if you pull it tight and you're not paying too close of attention, you can actually pull it too tight, and each sleeve opening will be a different length, which will be uncomfortable to wear. So after I get to the bottom, now I pull it tight, and I actually pull it till it starts to pucker. As you can see, it's puckering right there. Then I pull it back and do this. That eases all the thread out, and that way every single one of your armhole openings will be the same, but it still keeps it very tight through here, which gives you a nicer look. Now when you get ready to do this part of your sleeve, you're picking up the actual, let me get to the bottom, there's one more stitch I forgot. You're going to pick up the V's instead. So this V, this V, this V. So you take your first V, but you don't pull it too tight, you leave it a little bit loose. Then you go to your next V. Don't pull it too tight. Go back up to your top V. Go down to your bottom V. Top V. Bottom V. And then what I do is I fold it over when I get to the last stitch, and I do a couple overhands because I want to make sure this does not fall apart. And then you can weave it in, tie it off, however you like to finish off your pieces. It's entirely up to you. But as you see when you look here, this has a nice finish. It looks like they've actually been connected together as one individual piece. You can also see it here. See the little tiny stitches that kind of blend in? This one, in this case, they're green. And this one, gee, I can't even tell. I think they're green, but they could be blue. But that's how you finish off that aspect. Then after you get that part done, because now you've got all these sewn together, it's time to sew your sleeves together. So you fold it over. And here's something else I like to do. After I do my white armband or wristband, I like to take an extra amount of thread or yarn and hook it on one of my bread ties. That way this part can be used to sew your seam together, and you don't have an extra tail to weave in. As it is, you've got your two white tails, but this will eliminate, say, the green tail. So that's really a nice way to add a little more security to your work. Now when I sew these together, especially where the bands meet, I like to make sure when they go together they look very neat. Like you can see the knit, pearl. It just gives a really clean look to it. I'll show you how I do that. Get my thread here. I always start by just going in the end first, like a figure 8. Go into that one, then go back into this one. Kind of keeps my bottoms even. Then you go in your first roll, just like you did before, under your bars. Then you come back over here. Same thing, you want to go through the bar. Then you come over here and go through the bar. And you go through the bar again. So the bars are always there. You just kind of have to look for them. I'm doing this on a little bit larger piece of material so you can have a better view of what I'm doing. When you get to the top, looks like I got one more left to do. Then you pull it tight. And as you see, it looks like a knit, purl, knit, purl. You don't really notice that it's two separate pieces. And if it's done in the same color, it really blends in. Now to finish going up the side, you want to go in one set of stitches, which is right here. You don't want to get this last outside row because it's a little bit flimsy, so you want to go in. I have to come up here a little bit. Same thing, you go into the horizontal bar between the stitches, and you do it all the way up. I do the same thing. I catch every single horizontal bar, so if I have 28 rolls on my side front, I'll have 28 rolls on my back, or if I'm doing sleeve, I obviously have 28 rolls on either side of the sleeve. I just catch the bars. Now, like I said, I leave them loose so I can see what I'm doing, because you can always tighten them up. If you tighten them up early, sometimes it's hard to see where you left off, and you might accidentally, instead of going in here, going over there. I'm not going to go all the way to the top, but this will serve the purpose. And you pull it tight. Now when you pull it tight, see how nice that looks? Because every stitch is connected. And even if you pull it, you can't really see that this was sewed up with green when it touches the yellow. Now the next part we do will be the actual crew neck. Now just pretend like this is, I'll pull this piece up. We'll pretend like this piece here is this piece here, which is the front hook to the arm. The reason for the little pin is you want to know where your V starts. So your pattern will tell you to put a pin at the beginning of your V. So first we start by picking up the yarn. Rule of thumb I always have is if I have 6 rib bands on the bottom, I usually pick up 4 stitches. If I have 8 bands on the bottom, I'll pick up 6, and so forth. That way when I get to the bottom on the other side, it works out to the same amount. And then when I get ready to start the side, what works for me is I pick up 3 stitches. That's 2, there's 3. Skip 1, go to the next one, pick up 3. 1, 2, 3. Skip 1, pick up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you repeat it. You skip 1, pick up 3. 1, 2, 3. Now at this point, I take the safety pin off and put it on the needle because that's where we're going to need it. So now you just pick up all the stitches on the top of the V. And when you do that, I'll show you on here, you pick up all these, the ones from here to here, knit all of these off, and then pick up from here to here, move the marker and put it on the needle, and then continue down the other side. So this is one continuous piece, and you need to use a circular needle in order to get that. So I'll just take it up to the top. Normally you go all the way, clear around the neck, all the way to the back. I'm not going to do all of them due to time constraints. After you do that, this is called a mock rib. This one isn't a full rib because with a full rib, you get this real stretchy bottom, which sometimes is hard to block. With a mock rib, it pretty much stays open to start with, but it still has the appearance of a rib. And on the back, it definitely does not look like a rib. So the back of every single row, you would purl. So we'll go ahead and purl back. It's really simple to do. I'm trying to go a little quick, and unfortunately when I try to go quick, a lot of times I miss. But I found I like the way this works. Now, if you don't care to do it this way, you can actually do the standard knit 1 purl 1 rib all the way. There's no rule that says you can't. Like I said, this is your design. You can do whatever works best for you. Now, I'm not showing stitch counts, starts, begins, decreases. That's all on the actual pattern. This can apply to any pattern. It could be a baby's raglan. It could be an adult raglan. So these are just little techniques to get you through some of the awkward, possible, questionable parts that you may run across that you're not sure what to do with. Now, after you finish that, this roll is your standard knit purl. The only difference is when you get to here, you do an increase in the one before the pin and one in the increase in the one after the pin. That allows a little flare and give, so it will lay flat and it won't pucker. So we're going to do our knit purl. Excuse me. All the way across. Now this is where we do the increase. Hopefully I got the right amount of stitches to have a knit on that side of the safety pin. The interesting about it is if you do an increase before a pin, the second half of the increase has the appearance of a purl. So therefore the next stitch you do, you would knit. Oh, it looks like it's going to work out. Okay, so this is what I'm going to increase in. You knit in the front and the back of the same stitch. And that gives you, there's that little one that looks like it's a purl stitch. Slip your marker. Do the same thing again. Knit in the front and the back of the same stitch. And then you can knit again and then purl. Now you do your regular knit, purl, knit, purl. This would be considered row 1 on my pattern, because this is actually the start of the mock rib. The other two are kind of like setup rolls. Row 2 would be purling back. And then I'm just going to do an abbreviated one. For this one, I'm not going to do all 6 rows with the bind off, because I really like to get to the good part. Show how to do the buttonhole and how to bind off in rib versus binding off in straight knit. I'll show both so you can see the difference. When you're doing things like this, you really need to bind off in rib, because if you bind off in a straight knit stitch, it kind of looks odd. The end folds over to the front of your work and you can see all your stitches, where when you do it with a binding off in rib, it stands up on the edge and you really don't see it. So it's really a great way to do it. Now when you get to this part, the pattern will tell you where to go or how many stitches to go before you put your safety pins on. You start with 3, 1, 2, 3, and you put your pin in. I like to use the clover, but the Red Heart also has them, or you can use a regular safety pin. Then you count 10 or 12, however many stitches the pattern says. 2, 4, 6, 8. We'll just do 8 so we can have at least 3 buttonholes. And this is where your other buttonhole would be, I believe. You'd have to check the pattern for sure. So then we begin to do the buttonhole roll on the band. After you knit the 3rd stitch, drop this off because you will not need it again. Yarn over, knit 2 together, because this yarn over represents the purl. Now we're going to purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, drop the safety pin, yarn over, knit 2 together. Now we're going to purl, knit, purl, knit. Let's see, we're off by 1. So we'll just take this pin off. It's possible it should have been 1 space forward. I don't know. I don't have the pattern in front of me, but say your pin was there, yarn over, knit 2 together, and then you purl, knit, purl. It's possible the pin was off by 1. Since I'm doing a miniature version, I don't have the exact stitch count. Okay, so then you finish row 3 Row 4, you purl back. Row 5 is knit purl. Then row 6 is when you do your bind off, I believe. Or you do row 6 and then you bind off row 7. It just depends on what the pattern says. But even if you bind off on row 6, which is strictly purled across, do the bind off and rib, because it really, really is going to give you a nicer look. See, now I knitted the buttonhole, or I purled through the buttonhole. Let me get to the next buttonhole and I can show you again. There's the buttonhole right there. You just purl it like it was a real stitch, and then when you go to the next stitch, it gives you your little hole. 1.5 to 3/4 inch buttons fits these holes really nicely. It's entirely up to you which one you want to use. Oh, we're almost to the other buttonhole. There's the 3rd buttonhole. And then, like I said, you do your additional knit purl rolls. Follow the pattern. I'm just going to abbreviate this. I'm going to start this as my bind off roll. So we're going to knit 1, purl 1. Again, I need to put my yarn back there. It makes it easy for me to pass the stitch over. Knit 1, bind off. Bring the yarn in front because this is your purl. Bind off, knit, bind off, purl, bind off, knit, bind off, purl, bind off, knit, bind off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do some of just straight knit bind off so you can see the difference between the two. Both works. It just depends on what appearance you are looking for. I know the binding off and rib takes longer, but the finished product will look so much nicer. It's well worth the effort and time to go ahead and bind off the whole thing. Okay, that's good enough. Now see, the one where I did the knit 1, purl 1, it lays very flat there, and the actual bind off is up on the top edge, so it lays nice. The one where I just knitted the whole thing, as you can tell, it lays in the front and you can actually see the bind off. This one has a lot of stretch. You can really get a lot of stretch out of it, where this one doesn't necessarily have as much stretch. This one kind of does because I knit it bound off loosely, but if you accidentally bind off a little tight, you don't get that much stretch. And then after you do that, you would block it. I found a quick, easy way to block in most of the yarns where it works rather well. I lay it on the table and I use a sprayer and I spray mostly this area because this is where it likes to roll. And I get this really, really wet. Find a photo album. I put on a waterproof table, get a photo album, which is heavy, and then set it right on top, just like that. The moisture will seep into the fibers, and the weight of the notebook will help make it lay flat. After about 24 hours, I take the book off, and it's still damp, but it's laying flat. I let it dry for another 24 hours, and you're ready to go.